Hello and welcome to IASPrimers. My name is Shubhashish and you're watching today's daily news analysis. Now, as always, I have questions for mains answer writing practice, which you can get them evaluated for free. Now, today I have two very interesting questions which are important. So, one is on the central government, be it Prime Minister Modi and before this, Mr. Amit Shah. So they have said that their government is keen on lifting the Armed Forces Special Powers Act from Northeast. So this is one news. So this I'm going to ask. And the other question is about heat waves. Now there are a number of ways in which a question could be asked on heat waves. Here I am asking you as to what all factors are responsible for the recent heat wave, this intense heat that has taken up in these months that we are in. So this will be, since it is pure geography, so it is GS1. If we are asking you questions about what mitigation measures have to be taken or what is the concerns associated with heat wave, then it comes into disaster management, which is part of the GS3. Okay. So first news, 5G service rollout likely in August and September. I think this will be great, but I'm pretty sure this 5G will be very, very expensive. Okay, so 5G service to come, and the reason why it was being delayed was, one of the reason was the high spectrum pricing. So this is how it works. The government will control spectrum, and the government will, naturally it's a national resource or whatever, public resource. So this resource cannot be just given out to the private players. So these are auctioned and handed over to the private players based on whatever bidding that they do. Now it was felt that these rates were very, very high. So if the rates are very high, obviously the private players, ultimately they are working for profit, and there is a limit to which they can pass on the burden to the consumer. Right, and when they are paying a huge amount of money, for example, when they buy this spectrum, it will be given up for a 30-year duration, and the government expects to get 7.5 lakh crores. Now imagine how many players do we have at the present moment. So we have Jio, Airtel. I am not very sure about Vodafone Idea. I think it's more or less collapsed. Right. So from them collecting so much money, it affects their financial stability also. So let's see, and it's accrued over a very long period of time, but this is a huge amount. In fact, this is one of the reasons why some of the telecom companies had failed, specifically after the 3G auctions had taken up. Okay, so this is there, right? So this is the concern. So because of this, now the TRAI had recommended certain changes in the prices. Certain changes in prices over here, and also the Digital Communications Commission had recommended some steps which the government will have to approve. The statement is not very clear actually. It says the next step is approval of the Digital Communications Commission. We think it is some recommendations of that. We'll come to that. Now here you need to know about the TRAI. You need to know certain basics about the TRAI and also about the Digital Communications Commission. This I'm going to cover. This you check for yourself, but it's basically a regulatory authority, and to my knowledge it is a statutory body. Okay, so this is there. And with reference to the pricing, also the minister has said that the spectrum is there. It is ultimately leading to development. It can be empowering to society. So we will not just look at it from the commerce perspective, economic perspective, but also from the social perspective, broadly indicating that the government may be accommodative to the concerns of the private players. Okay. Now what you should think is that we talk about the 5G spectrum. But what is the spectrum actually? What is the frequency in which the spectrum is being given? So I taken this, so I get that this 5G spectrum includes 700 megahertz, 3.5 gigahertz and 26 gigahertz frequency. I am still, every time I read this, I feel a bit of a sense of a doubt. It could be 2.6 also. Maybe there's a typo. But what is important is that it is not restricted to a particular bandwidth. 700 megahertz right? So 700 megahertz was 3.5, 26, 2.6, whatever. So different bandwidths are given with reference to 5G. I think the only definition would be that it is high speed internet or high speed connectivity. Now coming to the Digital Communications Commission, and why I'm covering it separately is this seemed to be a bit too new for me, and this was actually the old telecom communication, which has been renamed as the Digital Communications Commission. Now this is not a statutory body, it was created, this telecom communication, via a resolution of the union government. So they have renamed this, probably indicating that changing times where digital is becoming more important overall over the telecom, right? So in fact WhatsApp calling is also digital and not so much of telecom. Now who all are the members? Now this can be important for your pre. So I have marked the members, so chairman, 4 full-time members, ex officio, and some part-time members. And these members are of the rank of the secretaries to the government. Right, so this is there. Now 4 full-time members have been mentioned over here, so you can find it. So digital our members are member finance, member production, services and technology. Part-time members includes the part-time members of the digital communications are Chief Executive Officer, Niti Aayog, Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs, etc. Now what does it do? First of all, it formulates the policy, then it prepares the budget for this Department of Telecommunications, and it is implementation. It also does the implementation. It makes the policy, it is also responsible for implementation. Okay, and the policies, you see, require the approval of the government, and that is why I said that this must be a typo over here. So this must be a policy that this commission had given to the government. Keen on lifting ASPA, says Prime Minister when he is in Assam, and he also attended a function where Bihu dancers were there. Right. So why I'm saying this is that Bihu dance is associated with which state? So that is important for prelims. I think most of you preparing would know this already. Okay, so he was addressing a rally, and there he said, you know, one sore issue with the people of Northeast is the implementation of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act and concerns associated with human rights violation, etc., etc. So this they are not happy with. So, before Prime Minister Modi, even the Minister of Home Affairs had said the same thing, and that time he was more specific, and he said that we need to redefine the disturbed areas under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Right, so this he had said. So it is the disturbed areas, a part of the state or the entire state where the AFSPA is applicable. Now, with reference to this, him being keen on lifting ASPA, he gives the context. He says that there are certain things that the government has been doing, because of which the security situation has improved. So there have been efforts made on improving the law and order situation. Then his government has signed peace pacts, or being responsible for peace pacts between different communities or with the government, such as the Bodo Accord. So Bodo Accord is there. Then the Bru-Riang talks are there. Right. So this is there. The Naga Accord is there. So some agreements or some peace treaties have been signed, with ceasefire agreements have been signed with the militant organizations, so that they drop arms or drop the path of violence and come into the mainstream. So see, this is all I'm saying, that we can address this question directly from the news itself. You can read yourself. I'm doing this article right now. Okay, so this is there. Then it also says that all these northeastern states they are very conscious of their demography, so demography and the region, and there are also border disputes within the states. Now I'm not saying India and China or like that, no, border disputes within the states. So efforts are being made to resolve that as well, right? So Meghalaya, Assam and Meghalaya boundary agreement, right? We get some points over here. Now look at the question. Recently the union government has conveyed its will to gradually withdraw ASPA from the Northeast. So 2-3 times we have had the statement, so that makes it important. So this can come in the GS3. So discussing the key provisions of AFSPA, state the steps being taken to ensure the withdrawal of AFSPA from the region. I think this part you can easily get from the net. I'll come to this withdrawal of AFSPA. So you see we get certain points, we'll add to this. So counter-insurgency operations, the law and order agreements in Naga, NDBF, NLFT. NDBF is National Democratic Bodo Front, so that is Bodos basically, Bodo Accord is with this. National Liberation Front of Tripura. BRU was more of not really a militant thing, it was the people living in, there was a community that lives in Myanmar, but there was this violence that took place, because of which they fled to Tripura. So BRU-Riang talks. Then cooperation with the neighbors. The militants would conduct a strike and then they will go to the neighboring countries. Sometimes they are getting shelters over there. So we are using diplomacy and engaging with our partners over there, so that we are able to take the militants to task. Sometimes we are also engaging in hot pursuits against the militants, such as the one that took place 20 kilometers inside Myanmar. And all of this requires diplomacy and cooperation of the neighboring countries, else it will be a war. Okay, so resolution of border disputes. Now civic action program was not mentioned. You know, all these security forces, when they're operating, so sometimes there is a sense of mistrust amongst the people and the security agencies. Naturally, it will happen eventually. So security agencies are prodded to, to bring about some things that will benefit the local society. It could be like the Samadhan initiative in Jammu and Kashmir, where education, coaching for IIT entrance exams, etc. are provided. So for education, for healthcare, for ration, anything for the local people, with the local people benefit. So that mistrust or the misgivings that the locals have with reference to the security agencies can be addressed. Then comes the emphasis on development, again not mentioned over here. So naturally, the people are joining the ranks of the militancy is mostly the youth population. They are joining because they are not being able to absorb into the mainstream. They feel the governments that are there, they are exploitative. Their interests will not be taken care of. But if the people are mainstreamed, if they get proper jobs, if their living conditions improve, naturally the militancy will not be there. And here again we must mention a point, we must include IR also, that several leaders have said that Northeast is at the heart of India's Act East policy. Several development initiatives are going on, especially the connectivity initiatives with the neighboring states. So that will all aid development, and development means the development of the people as well. So that will create ideal conditions for the withdrawal of AFSPA. Now moving on to the next one, move to disallow prayers at Jamia Masjid, decreed. Okay, so this is basically very short news about Jammu and Kashmir. I am not making, it's just basically an overview of what all things happen. Okay, so there is this Jamia Masjid which is in Srinagar, right? So it's not Delhi. I actually thought when I read this it's Delhi. Okay, so why would the center do? So when the prayers are taking place, naturally huge amount of people will come, they will come together, they will pray together. Sometimes something inflammatory may be said, and because of that there may be a security issue. In fact, a police officer was lynched sometime back, 2-3 years back, and the priest was Mirwais Umar Farooq, who is the leader of the Hurriyat separatist party. So such things can be used, sentiments could be used, especially there are some sentiments so against the state, so it may lead to a law and order situation. So that is why there is this restriction. Now the local parties over Jammu and Kashmir, which wants restoration of Article 370, so they have decried this move, and they say that when you say that everything is fine, when the center says everything is fine in Jammu and Kashmir, there is normalcy, then and when you say that prayers cannot be done, they don't go together. That means there is some problem, and this is because people are not happy with your move of 370. Next article, we'll do what is there in the news and then we'll come to the heat wave part. Okay, I think this is something that we all can relate to. Recently, a lot of power cuts are taking place. Now, this news is very specific to Delhi. Mr. Satyendra Jain is the Minister of Delhi government. But we all are facing some sort of a power cuts, something, right? Peak demand or the peak demand is increasing. Specifically, the summers are there. Then the heat wave is also there. So more ACs will be run or more devices for cooling. Okay. Plus, we are also referring to the coal shortage in states. So coal shortage is there. So power plants work on the coal. And I'll add to this that power plants also need water, even if it is thermal power plant, for the cooling. So with the evaporation on the dry aridity that is taking place because of the heat wave, that will also affect the overall electricity supply. Okay, now I'm done with this. Now let's move on to the heat wave component. So the Indian Meteorological Department has issued an orange alert for Friday. So orange alert, that means there are different ways by which the IMD classifies a particular area or the intensity of the heat wave. So color coded. I am pretty sure the next will be the red. Okay, so this is there, and the maximum temperature is expected to go up to 44 degrees Celsius. Now you should know about the Indian Meteorological Department. It is coming under which ministry? I know it, but I want you to read for yourself and visit their website, and what all tasks do they do. This will help you with your prelims preparation. Now moving on to the question, I will do it with the help of map. Then I have some brief pointers, and I will also share it with you on the detailed thing in the link. I think you should read that also. Okay, so first thing is, what is a heat wave? Then briefly state the factors responsible for the rise of for the heat wave reported in the month of March-April this year. I think after March, suddenly mid-March, then there is a period of spring, but there was intense heat that took place all of a sudden. So intense winters and then intense summers. Right away, straight away. So beach mein just the thing in the spring which we call the moderate temperature, that was not there at all, or for a very brief time. So why did this happen? So this is something that the UPSC can ask. You see the past year papers of UPSC, the GS1 component, you will find such papers. Now before going ahead with the answer, I could have used this number of combinations with the heat wave. For example, the concerns associated with heat wave, or from the point of view of disaster mitigation, but I'm not asking. I'm being very specific with reference to GS1, and I'm not giving you any scope, keeping the word limit at 150 words. Okay, now what is a heat wave? There are different definitions of heat wave, but we will use the definition of India Meteorological Department. I am sharing the link for you, but broadly it's counted on two ways. One is when the temperature is 5 degrees Celsius above normal. That time is known as the heat wave. And the other is when the temperature is above 45 degrees Celsius. No matter which season, if these two conditions are there, then it is a heat wave. Now, what factors are responsible for the heat wave reported during this time? Okay, now you see this orange, this is in red, right? So you can see this. So this again reflects, I think you can make out that we're talking about the intensity of the heat. White. 1 second. Yeah. Now, first point is that there was the advanced formation of the anticyclone. So, anticyclonic conditions. So, normally this takes place around the mid-April. So, we have the winters, right? So, winters, then we have March, and then around mid-April, we find the anticyclonic conditions. Now, let me just briefly explain cyclone and anticyclonic conditions. So, cyclonic conditions is when there is a low pressure. So, when the low pressure is there, the wind is drawn towards that region. Imagine a particular area is low pressure. Imagine this area is low pressure. Okay, sorry, not this area. This area is low pressure over here. So, it will draw winds from different region, high pressure region, and then they will rise. And normally when this happens, this is a period of instability, atmospheric instability, and it amounts to rains or some weather event. But when there is an anticyclonic condition, anticyclonic is exact opposite of this. So in high pressure, so wind from top, they basically top and it goes to the bottom like this. So this is the anticyclone. And during this time, because it is high pressure, there is a period of stability. We find clear skies. And because the air is moving downwards, moving from like this, so there is a creation of pressure which leads to heat. So more intense warming takes place. So clear skies during the time of April, that will lead to more heating again. So the clear view is there, no cloudy weather, so more heating takes place. So this takes place much later, but now it has taken place much sooner. Okay, so this happened, so the conditions were ripe, but this took place very, very soon. The other is the absence of western disturbance. Many articles write absence of western disturbance. I consulted a friend, he said it is weak. It is not that the western disturbance was not there at all. So what does the western disturbance do? So western disturbance is basically winds coming from the Mediterranean, that region. It flows from the west towards the east, right? So they keep flowing. They are to the north, they move towards the south. So that, that brings water alongside. So the rain from the water from Mediterranean, it is carried over, and then it leads to precipitation in the Himalayan region and a bit southwards. But it seems that this has moved a bit northwards, and as a result of this, the precipitation did not take place, and so that precipitation would have led to a bit of a cooling environment, right? So this is there. So absence or a weak western disturbance. Okay, then along the central Indian region, normally we have pre-monsoon showers. So that is also not taking place. So there are intermittent rains that take place across the country when there is heating. So that modifies the temperature, that cools down the temperature, but that is not taking place. Okay, so this, then strong La Nina. Strong La Nina has been there since the winters. La Nina is in the South American region. So it is normally seen that when the La Nina is there, if you must have studied in the geography, that we have strong monsoons. But what you wouldn't have read is during the time when the La Nina was there, during the winter times, it is taking place. So what we seen, there is some sort of cold winds that are moving from the Siberian region into India. So there is a north-south axis that is formed, that is of the cold winds. That is why we find intense cooling, intense winters, right? So this takes place, and after this we find intense heating. So this was there in the previous year only also, but this year it has been more intense. Now one reason could be, it's not mentioned in your first post, but it was in some other article, that because of this north-south axis, there is no explanation for this as to why this happens. It's very complex way by which the weather systems are connected. But yeah, and for simplicity, I don't want to go into that also, because you will not be able to write that. Okay. So it's because of this we find the advanced formation of anticyclone. But the article that I am sharing with you is on the first post. It says that the strong La Nina, alongside the advanced formation of anticyclone with weak disturbance, etc., has led to intense heat waves around the region, right? So this you have to enumerate. And lastly, you can always mention about the climate change could be responsible for this situation over here. So induced by the strong La Nina currents induced, they have been induced by the climate change. That is what many geography people are saying. One second. Okay. Now this was the opinion section. This was the entire opinion section over here. So I am not doing this revisiting death penalty jurisprudence. So I'm not doing this. I am not doing, India could have waited for the evidence of benefit of vaccination of all children. I find this Hindu newspaper a bit confused because when the COVID thing was taking place, it was making a case for early introduction of vaccination. So that's why I say very confused. I'm not covering, it's not important for mains. What is happening in Myanmar, maybe yes, it may be important, but only thing is we need to have a broad understanding of this. So these things will be there in the news. In fact, this will also be there. We don't expect a very specific question on this. That's why I'm not covering. What interested me was this Bihar budget for water. Bihar budgets for water. This is from the budget document. I have a video also. If you can watch that video, it will help you with your eco also. 1.5 hours. All the important schemes, initiatives from the point of view of eco, etc. are covered over there. Okay, so are freebies affecting the growth of India? This was the title, and this is kind of an interview between two people over here. Now, broadly, I'll summarize this. There are a few things that came to my mind. Not really from my mind, what I inferred over here, then made some additional content. So freebies are referred to subsidy, right? So subsidy. So what they're saying is that because of the high subsidy payout, the growth of India is getting affected because we are spending more on the revenue expenditure, right? So more on the routine expenditure. So when we do that, we are not aiding the capital formation. Assets are not creating. So if the assets are not getting created, so the capacity of the economy will not increase. Right. So that is not a good sign over here. And when we are spending more on the subsidy part, from where will the money come? The government does not have unlimited amount of money. So there is unlimited amount of money. So when the government spends more money, right, more of its money, and it does not create any assets which will provide them returns in the longer run. For example, when we invest in the bank or FD or whatever we do, so we put that money, so it's like an expenditure that we do, but we will get that money back plus some interest. So the same applies, very loosely I'm giving you this example, this applies for the economy also. Okay. So the government's fiscal deficit is increasing because of high amount of subsidy payouts that is taking place. Right, so you can have food subsidy bill, we have fertilizer subsidy, agriculture pension or power sector subsidies that are there. So huge amounts of subsidies are taking place. So fiscal deficit is increasing because of this. In fact, the pandemic has further worsened the situation. So at present, I think it's 6.9%, and there was a committee known as NK Singh committee, which had recommended that the fiscal deficit should be at 3% of the GDP. So it is at 6.9%. Now nationally, this means the government is spending more than what it is earning. So this will come by borrowing money, right? So the government is borrowing money mostly from India, the Indian banks or our investments, whatever, or it could be from the outside. But whenever the money is borrowed, this money has to be returned. Ultimately, it will have to be returned. On top of this, interest has to be paid. So this also has to be limited, because if we keep borrowing money, ultimately the interest component will keep bulging. It will keep increasing. So this will this will be your fiscal deficit, or the government expenditure will go more towards the interest payment rather than spending on the welfare of the society, welfare of the people. Right. So that is not a good sign. In fact, the debt to GDP ratio, according to the NK Singh committee report, was recommended at 40% of the GDP. That time it was at 60%, so it recommended that it should come down to 40%. But because of this, all the situation that is going on, pandemic, etc., we are at 90% of the GDP, which is very, very high. You can get this comparison over here, right? In fact, more accurately, it is at 87.9%. Now you can see here the government spending on interest payment. You see the government's expenditures over here. This square depicts the expenditure, and you see the interest component is the biggest component over here. I think this should make it clear for you. So this is the result of the high debt to GDP. This I have typed actually, this result of high debt to GDP. So you can refer the NK Singh committee report for this, which I just mentioned to you. Right, so this is not a good thing, this is unsustainable, this will not work. Now comes the aspect, are subsidies good or bad? There are some subsidies, not all subsidies are bad, some subsidies are good. We need subsidy in public health care, we need subsidy in the education sector, we need to give subsidy to the farmers. This enables food security. But that subsidy has to be rationalized. There has to be a limit to it. It should not be abused. So that aspect has to be looked into. Subsidies should be seen as an investment. That is what this Madam Renu Kohli had said over here, in one of the places over here. Okay. So welfare is also a key component that has to be worked into. And in the present context, where we have more technology penetration, we have new methods like direct benefit transfer. All the more reasons of it's easier for rationalization of the subsidies. Okay, so investment should be seen as investments into people, but some subsidies cause harm. For example, the power subsidy given to the farmers, they keep their pumps on for all the time because they are not paying the bills. So that has led to the groundwater depletion, unsustainable farming practices. So groundwater depletion and high incidence of cancer, or pesticide subsidy. So that is not good. Soil fertility is going down because of the urea subsidy. So wrong proportion of subsidy fertilizer is being used because urea is subsidized as compared to other nutrients. Okay. Now here one distinction has to be made, that is subsidy that is going to the people directly, like farm subsidy, Narega, etc., and subsidy that is going to the industrial sector, because here it referred that the subsidy that was given to the power sector sometime in 2016-17, it was the biggest chunk of the subsidy expenditure. Right, subsidy in the form of the debt that the power sector has had. So 2015-16 years. So power sector, the state electricity boards, they provide you electricity at a subsidized rate, right? But they have to buy electricity from the NTPC or the people who are producing the electricity power plants. So ultimately, they are spending more money on procuring and distributing your electricity, but they are not receiving as much money. So it is leading to debt. So this is actually more. This is more as compared to subsidy that is going on the welfare expenditure. In fact, farm loan waivers, if you compare farm loan waivers with the subsidy that is going on for recapitalization of banks, so the NPS, so that again is not as significant as the one that is going for the subsidy for the recapitalization of banks for the industrial failure. Okay. So this is there. Now another aspect that was introduced was fiscal stability is not just about spending. It is also about revenue creation. So more needs to be done for the state to increase their revenue creation. And how can that be done? Remember yesterday's, day before yesterday article, that is Central Board of Direct Taxes is saying that the income tax, direct taxes that are there should increase. So 60% of the overall tax collection. So more people should be brought into the ambit of tax. So we call that as tax base. Right, so tax base should be improved. Because of that, tax buoyancy should be improved. So such initiatives should be also done. So more things should be done on the revenue creation side also, but also rationalize expenditures. Bihar budgets for water. Okay, let me cover this. Let me cover this part over here, the budget part, then the rest of the article. It's only this part that was important, or that was new actually. So what they are saying is that in the urban areas, like we have the constituencies for the urban municipalities, it is the wards. So the authority area of the municipality, right? So the respective wards that are there in a particular place in the municipality. So in that there will be a 3-member committee, three women basically, who will be responsible for deciding as to how the water is provisioned, how the water is utilized. So women are being provided a stake in policy making or decision making with reference to water. So makes sense because at the level of the household, if you see, it's women who may be engaged in the kitchen work or in the thing I'm stereotyping over here, or in the washing clothes, whatever, right? For etc thing, different thing, household works. So women's view are important over here. So women's view are being taken over here, and the budgeting is being done as to which water, how much water should go to which place, how much water should be there for one particular person, all of that. Right, so that will be there, and since the women are the ultimately end users over here, so ultimately whatever the state decides with the view of the community over here, so there will be greater cooperation. So innovative idea over here which Bihar has been implementing. Right, so this is being done over here. Now here we have reference of what the Bihar is doing with reference to the availability of good drinking water, because drinking water, if water is available to you, then it will lead to better health outcomes also. So thereby National Family Health Survey has been mentioned over here. Okay, so 1.56 crore households have been provided water out of the targeted 1.72 crore rural households, right? So more water is being provided. Now read this article, we read this part over here. So we have the Jal Jeevan Mission, which aims to provide household clean tap water connection to every home by 2024. Right, so this work has to be intensified because of the restrictions that were imposed by the COVID-19. Then we have in Bihar Mukhyamantri Peyajal Nishchay Yojana, right? So which is responsible for ensuring it's groundwater, basically governance with reference to the groundwater over here. Then we have reference of the theme for the World Water Day, which is groundwater, making the invisible visible. That is prioritizing upon the groundwater, which we are not focusing so much. We are focusing on the irrigation, the groundwater, not the groundwater, surface water irrigation, river water, dams, etc. But we also need to focus as to how do we utilize and invest in the groundwater. So making the invisible visible. That was the theme. So that can be asked in your pre also. Not very important. It's just that External Affairs Minister had a meeting with his counterpart in Bangladesh plus the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, and they are discussing about some key issues like how do they promote trade, commerce, and the supply chain disruption that has been invoked by the COVID-19 and the Ukrainian crisis. Now coming to the international news, I'm just doing a brief overview. This news is important particularly. So Biden proposes $33 billion aid for Ukraine. This article does not really specify as to how that money would be used or from where will that money come, but definitely one would be the humanitarian assistance, and other is providing money for the reconstruction of Ukraine after the war, post-war reconstruction, and also the military aid, providing them equipments, etc. Russia plans referendum and seize Ukraine areas, right? They have won over certain areas. This is what the UN is saying. So they will have the referendum where the people would be asked to vote. But I don't know how many people would accept this. I mean, it doesn't really matter because it's Russia's way. They have the power, authority. They can do whatever they wish. Okay. So this is their Sri Lanka's worker. So instability in Sri Lanka. Now Z's global security initiative to counter the Quad grouping. Okay. So we all know that USA's initiatives like the Quad and then the AUKUS, both asked in your mains paper in different years, but recently. So Quad and AUKUS, such groupings have been formed, and whatever they say, it is aimed at containing China over here, right? So we have India, we have Australia to the south, and then Japan. So it is aimed at containing China. Then they talk about creation of a rules-based order or safeguarding the rules-based order, that is no country should claim the territories of the other areas, or no country should be able to claim the entire region like what China is doing. So rules based order, and there should be freedom of navigation. This route is very, very important from the point of view of trade and commerce. So that is there, right? This is what we are talking about. And whenever we say, we never really say that it is aimed at containing China. We are very conscious about it, but it seems it is aimed at countering China only, and which is what the Chinese also say. And there are very interesting ways of putting things up. He said, Xi Jinping, that some countries were eager to engage in exclusive small circles and small groups. Right, so small circles, small groups is an apparent reference to AUKUS and the Quad group. Okay, so they are talking about the rules-based order and other things. So now they are creating a counter. Xi Jinping has proposed, that is Global Security Initiative to the Quad, AUKUS, and also the Five Eyes. The Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. I'll share that content for you later. Okay. So this is the okay. Now this article doesn't say anything about who all would be the members of this global security initiative. Would India be a member or not? It's just at the proposal stage. But yes, one idea would be to keep the USA out of it. So China, if it is having a meeting like this, summit like this, naturally the Southeast Asian countries would also be part of this. And they are concerned about this region, and which they consider it as their backyard, right? So this area again will be the focus over here. We don't know about India or other countries be part of it. No mention has been given over here. Okay, what is this Five Eyes Alliance? So it is a alliance of the between Australia, Canada, New Zealand. This is important for your pre. Okay, where they'll be sharing intelligence communications amongst these countries. So this was in 1946 it came upon, and then it was with the Cold War situation. Now the same can be utilized with reference to China, which is becoming more and more assertive, aggressive also, right? So against that as well. In fact, we are entering into a phase of world instability with the Ukrainian crisis and China taking stance. So kind of an alliance like system is coming up. Okay, now moving on to the business section. So all important for your prelims actually. So briefly, Antitrust Regulator, Competition Commission of India said to raid 2 of Amazon's top sellers. Okay, so Competition Commission of India, the main task is a statutory body, and its main task is to see that unfair practices are not used, or things like predatory pricing is mentioned in this article. Predatory pricing, that is, keep the pricing so low that your competitors are not able to do anything. Even keep it below the cost price so that others cannot do, and then you have the entire market share. What Jio did was actually a kind of a predatory pricing, which the TRAI turned a blind eye to. Okay, but it benefited us. Okay, antitrust regulator, right? So they have this. You must have bought these things from Amazon. So Cloudtail and Appareo. So they are being favored, which they feel. So they are going to investigate this. Okay. When the private companies, if there is some sort of a cyber breach that has taken place, then it has to be reported within a time period of 6 hours. And with reference to this, I am not discussing this right now. We need to study about the cyber security policy and the national cyber security strategy. And if anything happens, it is the CERT, Computer Emergency Response Team India, which looks into the issue of the cyber breaches and what needs to be done to protect the thing. Okay, power cut is there. So in the industrial area of the Manesar, so that's there, I think, everywhere. Okay. Coal will be a key source of energy even in 2040. It is coming from the World Coal Association. It is not a government entity anyhow, right? So that thing you need to know. Okay, so that will be there by the time the solar renewables are there. they are not sustainable ways of electricity. The intensity of the renewables or the solar radiations or the winds, they keep varying. So it has to be complemented with something that is stable. So power plant based electricity, coal based electricity will be there. Coal demand slid 18% in quarter 1. We're not concerned with this. We are concerned with the World Gold Council. So this you can read over here, right? I'll come to that later, right? So we need to know about the World Gold Council. Then we have a forecast about the US economy. US economy being the biggest economy, if something goes bad over there, it affects the entire world, the entire demand of the world also. So the GDP over there has dipped by 1.4%, right? So in the 2 years it has dipped. The reasons being Omicron, trade, right? So all these factors over here. Right. Right. I'll do this tomorrow. So this is the World Gold Council. It's basically a company. It's not an intergovernmental agency. It's a company, and it is responsible for setting the standards across the world for industry, gold industry, mining to investment, whatever is taking place, pricing, etc. It is done by this, and it is headquartered in London, United Kingdoms, and it has some subsidiaries like the World Gold Council, USA, etc. Right then, so this concludes the session. So thank you for streaming in to IASPrimers with me, Shubhashish. Bye bye, take care, and all the best.